The morning began with a sound that made the entire neighborhood freeze. The deep, thunderous growl of diesel engines firing up at once. Birds scattered from the rooftops, dogs barked wildly, and curtains snapped open across the cul-de-sac. At the center of it all stood Ethan Cole, arms folded, sunglasses reflecting the rising sun. Behind him, a convoy of 7 bulldozers lined up like an army preparing for war. Every engine roared to life in unison. The ground trembled. Across the street, Karen Mitchell, the self-appointed queen of the Oak Ridge HOA, nearly dropped her morning coffee. She stormed out of her porch in her bathrobe, clutching her clipboard like a weapon. "What is this?" she shrieked, her voice slicing through the air. Ethan didn't answer. He just nodded at the foreman, who gave a single whistle, and one of the bulldozers rolled forward, treads crushing the edge of his own driveway where a HOA violation notice sign still hung crooked from last week. Karen's face turned the color of a ripe tomato. "You can't do this. You're in violation of at least 7 community codes." Ethan smirked. "You mean the codes you invented last Tuesday?" Neighbors began to gather, phones out, recording the chaos. Karen's husband peeked nervously from behind the curtains, muttering, "Oh, she's not gonna like this." But this wasn't a random act of rebellion. Ethan had been planning this moment for weeks. Ever since the HOA had fined him for parking his own truck in his own driveway, Karen had made it her mission to break him. She filed complaints, issued warnings, even threatened to have his property reviewed for compliance demolition. What she didn't know was that Ethan had friends. Big ones, heavy machinery kind of friends. As the first bulldozer's blades scraped across the lawn, tearing through the neat flower beds Karen had forced every homeowner to maintain, she screamed, "I'll call the sheriff." Ethan turned slowly, his voice steady over the roar of engines. "Go ahead, I already did." And as the second bulldozer rolled in, sunlight glinting off its blade like a war banner, Karen realized this wasn't a stunt. This was payback, and the battle for Oak Ridge had just begun. The ground shook again, the cameras rolled, and somewhere deep inside, Karen knew she'd just lost control of her kingdom. Karen Mitchell wasn't used to losing control, especially not in her neighborhood. For 6 straight years, she'd ruled Oak Ridge like a miniature dictator. Her clipboard, her sword, her bylaws, her crown. But now, standing barefoot on her dew-soaked lawn, she was watching a fleet of bulldozers tear through Ethan Cole's property like an invading army. The sight was pure chaos, fences crumbling, flower beds exploding into clouds of dirt, and the sound of metal scraping asphalt. Neighbors whispered and filmed, their mouths half open, some cheering, some terrified. Karen, however, saw none of that. Her mind had already switched into battle mode. "Margaret!" she shouted, spinning toward her vice president across the street. "Emergency HOA meeting, now!" Within minutes, Karen had rallied her loyalists. A small mob of clipboard-wielding residents marched toward Ethan's lot, waving printouts of the community rulebook like protest signs. Ethan leaned against his truck, arms crossed, watching them gather. He didn't flinch when Karen stormed up to him. "You're violating Article 7, Section B, Paragraph 3, she barked. "Unauthorized heavy equipment operation, destruction of community landscape, disturbance of peace, and—" "Karen," Ethan interrupted, his tone calm but cutting. "The peace was disturbed when you fined me for having a birdhouse." A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. Karen's jaw twitched. "This isn't funny. You can't just bring in industrial vehicles to destroy property." "Property?" Ethan smirked. "My property, Karen, not yours. And as for the bulldozers, I got full permits from the city." He held up a laminated sheet. The seal gleamed in the sunlight. Karen snatched it, scanning it rapidly, her face draining of color. This can't be real." "It's real enough for the sheriff," Ethan said, nodding toward the approaching squad car. The blue lights flashed as Officer Daniels stepped out, adjusting his hat. "Morning, folks. What's all the commotion?" Karen pounced. "Officer, arrest him! He's tearing apart Oak Ridge." The officer sighed. "Ma'am, according to this permit, he's well within his rights. You might want to step back before you get flattened." The laughter this time was loud, unstoppable. Karen's nostrils flared like a bull about to charge. She turned to her followers, hissing under her breath. "Fine. If the law won't stop him, the HOA will." Her eyes burned with fury. "Let him play with his bulldozers. Tonight, we'll vote to condemn his property." Ethan's smirk faded. For the first time, he realized Karen wasn't done fighting. She was just getting started. By sunset, the calm of Oak Ridge had vanished. What used to be a picture-perfect suburb now looked like a construction war zone, muddy tire tracks, broken fences, and clouds of dust rising like smoke signals. But while the neighborhood slept, Karen Mitchell wasn't resting. She sat at her kitchen table, laptop glowing in the dark, papers scattered like battle plans. Her cat, Sir Whiskerton, watched silently as she typed furiously. An emergency. HOA email marked confidential. Code red. Cole property. Within 30 minutes, the HOA loyalists gathered inside her living room. Coffee cups clattered, whispers buzzed, and paranoia filled the air. Karen stood before them like a general before her troops. "This man," she began, projecting a photo of Ethan standing beside his bulldozers, "has declared war on Oak Ridge. He's made a mockery of our rules, our community. And if we don't stop him now, he'll bring the entire HOA system crashing down." Margaret, her nervous vice president, raised a hand. "But the officer said his permits were valid, Karen. Maybe we should—" Karen slammed her clipboard on the table. "The city gave him those permits. But who controls Oak Ridge?" "We do. The HOA is law here." She leaned closer, eyes gleaming with determination. "We'll hold a vote tomorrow to condemn his property for environmental violation. We'll call in the environmental inspector, my cousin's husband. He owes me a favor." The room went quiet. Karen smirked. "Once his property's condemned, the city will revoke his permit. No bulldozers, no construction, no chaos." Margaret whispered, "That's ruthless." Karen's smile widened. "No, Margaret, that's order." Meanwhile, across the street, Ethan was sitting by the fire pit, sipping coffee with his construction crew. They were laughing, replaying the footage neighbors had uploaded to social media. The clip of Karen screaming, "You can't do this," had already gone viral under the tag Our Ho Karen Meltdown. Ethan didn't realize that while the internet was laughing, Karen was plotting. She spent the entire night drafting letters, forging official-looking documents, and organizing a fake emergency environmental audit. Her printer hummed nonstop. By dawn, she stood before her window, watching Ethan's bulldozers idle quietly in the distance. She whispered to herself, "Enjoy your last day, Ethan. By tonight, you'll be the one getting bulldozed." She clicked send on her email. Subject: Emergency HOA condemnation vote, 8 p.m. The message spread through Oak Ridge like wildfire. By morning, the battle lines weren't just drawn. They were digital, official, and deadly serious. Ethan had no idea the paperwork war had begun. The morning sun glared off Ethan's bulldozers like polished armor. The crew had just finished leveling the old shed when his foreman, Luke, came jogging up with his phone in hand, face pale. "Boss, you might want to see this." Ethan grabbed the phone. On screen was a leaked email, Karen's secret HOA notice, now spreading like wildfire in the Oak Ridge group chat. Someone from inside her loyal circle had snapped a screenshot and sent it to everyone. The subject line read, "Emergency HOA condemnation vote. Tonight at 8 p.m. Target Cole property." Ethan froze. Then, slowly, a grin spread across his face. "So she's going to play dirty." Luke chuckled. "Looks like she forgot the neighborhood isn't scared of her anymore." The leak had triggered a rebellion. Homeowners who'd spent years under Karen's rule were finally speaking up. Comments flooded the group chat. "She can't condemn private property. This is abuse of power." "Didn't she fine me for having a red mailbox last year?" By noon, Karen's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Notifications, angry texts, even memes of her screaming into a clipboard flooded her inbox. Her power was slipping, and she knew it. At 1 p.m., she stormed into the HOA office, flanked by Margaret and two of her most loyal members. "Find out who leaked that email," she barked. Margaret stammered, "Karen, maybe we should cancel tonight's vote." "Cancel?" Karen hissed. "Never. If anything, we'll make it public. Show them what happens when someone challenges HOA authority." Across the street, Ethan was already planning his counterstrike. He set up a live stream, a drone hovering above his property, capturing every bulldozer, every inch of legal work being done. The title: "The HOA thinks they can shut me down. Watch what happens next." By evening, thousands of viewers were watching live. The neighborhood was crawling with people, some cheering Ethan on, others hiding behind blinds. At exactly 8 p.m., Karen stood in front of the HOA meeting table set up on the cul-de-sac. Microphone in hand, she cleared her throat, trying to sound calm. "We are here to address the violations of Mr. Ethan Cole." But before she could finish, Ethan's voice echoed through a loudspeaker. "Funny thing, Karen. Seems the internet didn't vote in your favor." A projector flickered to life, showing a flood of online comments, tens of thousands mocking the HOA's power trip. Karen's face went crimson. "Turn that off! Turn it off!" The crowd laughed, cameras flashing. Ethan leaned against his bulldozer, smirking. "Looks like your little secret meeting's gone public." Karen's clipboard trembled in her hands. The control she'd built over 6 years was slipping through her perfectly manicured fingers, and she could feel it. By the next morning, the HOA meeting had gone viral. Clips of Karen screaming at Ethan, under the floodlights, had hit 1 million views overnight. Comment sections were brutal. "Karen chaos, clipboard queen, her bulldozer justice." But while the internet laughed, Karen was busy plotting revenge. She wasn't the type to lose twice. Not to anyone, and definitely not to Ethan Cole. Sitting in her office, she scrolled through legal contacts until she found one. Robert Hale, attorney at HOA Law, a man with a reputation for bending rules until they screamed. She dialed his number. Hale Law Offices, a smooth voice answered. Robert, it's Karen Mitchell. I need a cease and desist order effective immediately. I want his entire construction operation frozen. Robert chuckled. You're talking about Cole, the guy with the bulldozers? Yeah, I've seen the clips. You sure you want to poke that bear? Karen's tone sharpened. He's embarrassing this community. If I go down, so does Oak Ridge, and so will you if you don't act fast. There was a pause. Then, fine, I'll get the paperwork, but you'd better have proof of violation. Karen smiled coldly. I've got something better. Influence. By noon, a courier arrived at Ethan's site with an envelope stamped legal notice. The crew went silent as Ethan tore it open. His eyes scanned the page. Temporary order of work suspension. Property under HOA legal review. He crumpled the paper in his fist. She got a lawyer. Luke frowned. Can she even do that? Ethan exhaled sharply. Not legally, but it'll stall us. Karen's plan was working. The city paused his construction until the dispute was resolved. The bulldozers sat idle, silent for the first time in days. The neighborhood watched from windows, whispering like nervous spectators at a boxing match. That night, Karen hosted a live stream of her own. Good evening, Oak Ridge, she began, smiling smugly into the camera. I'm happy to announce the HOA has taken legal action to protect our community from unauthorized destruction. Comments poured in, some supportive, most furious. But Karen didn't care. She saw only one thing: victory. Across town, Ethan watched her smug grin on his phone screen, fury simmering beneath his calm exterior. You want to play legal games, Karen? He muttered. Fine. Let's see how you handle the city council. He picked up his phone and called someone, an old friend with political pull downtown. Hey, it's Ethan. Remember that favor you owe me? Yeah, it's time to cash it in. The next morning, Karen would wake up to find that her little legal victory had sparked something far bigger than she ever imagined. By sunrise, the quiet streets of Oak Ridge were anything but peaceful. Satellite vans lined the road, cameras rolled, and microphones pointed toward Ethan's property like soldiers awaiting orders. News crews had swarmed the neighborhood overnight. After catching wind of the viral Bulldozer story, every local station wanted a piece of the drama between the HOA president gone rogue and the man who fought back with bulldozers. Ethan stood by the gate, sunglasses on, calm but ready. Morning, folks, he greeted the reporters. Welcome to Oak Ridge, the community where your grass height matters more than your rights. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Cameramen zoomed in. Across the street, Karen stood frozen on her porch, watching in disbelief. Oh no, 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 she whispered. Her kingdom had turned into a circus, and she wasn't the ringmaster anymore. Within minutes, reporters were knocking at her door. Mrs. Mitchell, care to comment on the HOA's decision to file a cease and desist order? Karen forced a tight smile. This is a private community matter. A journalist cut her off. Then why are there bulldozers and 1.2 million views online? Her smile cracked. She slammed the door. Margaret, she hissed. Get me the PR manual. We're doing a statement before this gets out of control. Meanwhile, Ethan's friend at City Hall, Councilman Reeves, pulled some strings. That afternoon, the City Council announced an open hearing to review Oak Ridge HOA's conduct. The statement was clear. Due to multiple complaints and viral evidence, Oak Ridge HOA will undergo an immediate ethics and procedural review. When Karen saw the headline, her coffee nearly flew across the room. They can't review me. I run the HOA. Margaret winced. Not anymore, Karen. It's out of our hands now. By the time evening rolled around, Oak Ridge was flooded with onlookers. Drones buzzed overhead. Live streams ran non-stop. And every neighbor seemed to have an opinion. Ethan, standing in front of his bulldozers, gave a brief statement to the media. I'm not here to destroy a neighborhood, he said. I'm here to rebuild freedom from one woman's clipboard. The crowd cheered. The cameras loved it. Karen watched from her window, face pale, hands trembling. They're making me the villain, she whispered. Margaret sighed softly. Karen, maybe it's time to back off. Karen's eyes hardened. Back off? Never. If the city wants a war, I'll give them one. They'll regret ever crossing me. She picked up her phone and dialed Robert Hale again. Cancel the cease and desist. We're going nuclear. The next morning, Ethan would find something unexpected at his gates. Not police, not cameras, but heavy machinery he didn't order. The next morning, Oak Ridge woke to a sound no one expected. More bulldozers. But these weren't Ethan's. The engines growled from the opposite end of the cul-de-sac. Shaking windows and rattling nerves, Ethan stepped outside, coffee in hand, confused. His own bulldozers were parked and silent, yet someone else's machines were tearing up the edge of his property line. "What the hell?" he muttered. A massive yellow excavator lurched forward, its claws scooping deep into the soil near the fence. A backhoe followed, chewing through hedges and tearing a path toward the street. Ethan sprinted toward the crew, waving his arms. "Hey, you can't do that!" "Who authorized this?" The foreman barely looked up. "HOA order. We're here to remove non-compliant structures." Ethan froze. "Ho? You mean Karen?" The foreman handed him a clipboard with a stamped document. Sure enough, at the bottom, in thick, confident letters, "Authorized by Karen Mitchell, President, Oak Ridge Homeowners Association." Ethan's blood boiled. "This is my property!" "That's private land." But before he could stop them, the machines were already tearing down a section of his fence. Karen watched from her porch, phone in hand, live streaming the entire event with a smile that could freeze lava. "Good morning, Oak Ridge," she said into the camera. "Today, we're cleaning up our community, one illegal eyesore at a time." The comments exploded instantly. Some cheered her on, others were horrified. "She's lost it. This looks like a personal vendetta. Oh, Karen strikes again." Ethan dialed the sheriff immediately. "They're demolishing my fence without cause." Within minutes, Officer Daniels arrived, lights flashing. He stepped out, jaw tight. "Mrs. Mitchell, what exactly do you think you're doing?" Karen stood tall. "I'm enforcing community code." Daniels examined the papers and sighed. "These aren't city-approved orders, ma'am. These are copies of HOA citations. You can't authorize demolition." Karen blinked, then stammered, I was told." "By who?" Ethan snapped. "Your lawyer?" Karen turned red. "This property violates at least 12. Daniels cut her off. "You're done, Karen. Shut it down, now." The officer ordered the contractors to halt operations. The engines died out one by one, leaving behind mangled hedges and deep tire tracks across Ethan's yard. Karen's livestream cut abruptly. The damage was done, and the internet had captured every second of it. By nightfall, Karen the Destroyer trended across every platform. Ethan leaned against his truck, watching the chaos unfold on his phone. "You wanted war, Karen?" he said softly. "Now you've got it." He wasn't going to wait for the next attack. He was about to launch his own. By dawn, Oak Ridge didn't look like a suburb anymore. It looked like a battleground. The air still carried the scent of diesel and broken dirt. Karen's unauthorized demolition had left half of Ethan's fence in ruins, and now the entire neighborhood buzzed with gossip and disbelief. But Ethan wasn't angry. He was calculating. He'd had enough of Karen's clipboard tyranny. And this time, he wasn't going to fight in silence. He called Luke and the rest of the crew before sunrise. "We're not rebuilding the fence," he said flatly. "We're rebuilding the neighborhood, and everyone's going to see it." By 8 a.m., the street was alive again. Bulldozers, dump trucks, and even a flatbed carrying supplies. Ethan had rented a sound system, a banner printer, and a live streaming setup. The banner flapped in the morning wind. "HOA Reform Rally, hosted by the people of Oak Ridge." Karen, looking out her window in her bathrobe, nearly choked on her coffee. "He's what?" she screamed. Within an hour, residents began showing up, first out of curiosity, then out of solidarity. Old neighbors who'd been fined for silly infractions, mailbox paint, garden gnomes, kids' bikes on driveways, now stood shoulder to shoulder, holding signs that read, "Down with the HOA dictator, no more Karen control." Ethan stepped up onto a makeshift platform, an overturned crate between two bulldozers, and grabbed a megaphone. "Folks, we've all had enough," he shouted, voice echoing across the block. "They fine us, threaten us, humiliate us, for what? For living in our own homes. It's time to end this madness." The crowd erupted in cheers. Drones hovered above, capturing the growing movement. The livestream chat was exploding with viewers. "Free Oak Ridge! A bulldozer army rises." Karen burst through her door, storming toward the crowd. "This is illegal assembly!" she yelled. "You're trespassing on community land." Ethan turned the megaphone toward her. "Community land? You mean the land we paid for? The one you used to bully everyone?" A roar of applause drowned her out. Karen's face twisted with fury. "I'll call the police again." Ethan smiled calmly. "Go ahead. They're already here." Officer Daniels stood nearby, arms crossed, watching silently. This time he wasn't here for Ethan. He was here for fairness. Karen's confidence faltered as she realized the tide had turned. Her voice wavered. "You people don't understand. Without rules, this place will fall apart." Ethan stepped closer, lowering the megaphone. "No, Karen, it'll finally come together." The crowd cheered again, louder this time. For the first time in Oak Ridge history, the residents stood united, and Karen Mitchell stood alone. But in the shadows, she was already hatching one final move, something that could destroy, Ethan completely. By the next morning, Oak Ridge was divided into two camps. Those cheering for Ethan's bulldozer army, and those who feared what Karen would do next. Karen Mitchell sat at her desk, her hair perfectly set, her face calm, but her eyes burned with fury. The rally had humiliated her in front of cameras, councilmen, and her own neighbors. But Karen didn't get mad. She got strategic. She opened her laptop and began sending emails, dozens of them, to city code enforcement, to zoning inspectors, to environmental safety officers. Each message contained anonymous complaints about Ethan's construction, unpermitted, soil movement, toxic fluid leaks, illegal disposal of debris. None of it was true, but truth had never stopped Karen before. By noon, 3 city trucks rolled into Oak Ridge, red lights flashing. Inspectors in safety vests climbed out, clipboards in hand. Neighbors peeked through curtains, whispering, "Oh no, she actually did it." Ethan was on his property, reviewing footage from the rally when one of the inspectors approached. "Mr. Cole, we've received multiple complaints about environmental hazards on your land." Ethan frowned. "Hazards? There's nothing hazardous here except one woman with a clipboard." Still, protocol was protocol. The inspectors fanned out, taking pictures, collecting samples, and writing notes. From across the street, Karen stood by her window, phone recording, voice dripping with false concern. "Oh dear," she said loudly enough for her followers to hear. "Looks like the city's finally catching up with him." But Ethan wasn't stupid. He noticed one of the inspectors, a tall man with a patchy beard, quietly talking to Karen's vice president, Margaret. Something was off. He walked over calmly. "Everything okay over here?" The man flinched. "Just standard checks." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Funny, because I checked the city site this morning. No inspections were scheduled for Oak Ridge today." The man's face went pale. We were called in under emergency request." Ethan smirked. "By who?" "The president of Oak Ridge?" Before the inspector could answer, a familiar car pulled up. Councilman Reeves. He stepped out, holding a folder. "Ethan, don't worry. The city didn't send them. They're acting on unauthorized requests." Karen's phone stopped recording. "Unauthorized?" she stammered, stepping outside. "That's absurd. I was protecting—" Reeves cut her off sharply. "Protecting what, Karen? Your ego?" The crowd began to gather again. Ethan folded his arms, calm but smiling. "Guess the only thing toxic here, Karen, is your leadership." The inspectors, realizing they'd been duped, packed up and left. Karen's fake plan had backfired, spectacularly. But as she turned to retreat inside, one thought burned in her mind. If paperwork couldn't destroy him, maybe politics could. City Hall hadn't seen drama like this in years. Cameras lined the marble steps, microphones clustered at the entrance, and curious onlookers packed the hallway. The Oak Ridge feud had gone fully public, and at the center of it all stood Karen Mitchell, HOA president turned self-proclaimed savior of the suburbs, flanked by her lawyer, Robert Hale. Her plan was bold and dangerous, to file a formal petition of community protection, demanding the city ban Ethan Cole from any further development or property expansion within Oak Ridge. It was a legal stretch, but if anyone could twist a rule, it was Karen. As the hearing began, Karen adjusted her pearl necklace and took the podium. "Honorable council members," she began, her voice sweet and poised. "Our once peaceful community has been turned into a construction zone by a man who refuses to respect the rules that keep Oak Ridge beautiful." Her lawyer nodded approvingly. She continued, voice rising with passion. "He's brought in bulldozers, destroyed landscaping, endangered children, and violated every code imaginable. We ask for immediate revocation of his construction rights and permanent restriction from any further property work." A murmur spread through the chamber. Cameras flashed. Then Councilman Reeves cleared his throat. "Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell. Mr. Cole, your response?" Ethan stepped up to the podium, calm as ever, sleeves rolled up, no lawyer beside him. "Just confidence." "Council members," he began, "you've heard her side. Now here's the truth. Every permit I have was issued legally. Every inspection passed. The only thing I violated was Karen's pride." A ripple of laughter echoed through the audience. Karen's jaw tightened. Ethan went on, his voice steady. "I've lived in Oak Ridge for 6 years. In that time, this HOA fined me for my mailbox color, my pickup truck, even my doghouse. But this isn't about rules anymore. It's about control. One person's control over everyone else." Councilman Reeves leaned forward. "Do you have evidence of misconduct by the HOA?" Ethan smiled and gestured toward the door. "Actually, yes." The doors swung open, and in walked half the neighborhood. Dozens of residents holding letters, fines, and citations from Karen's reign. One woman held up a photo of her child's swing set, red tagged by the HOA, for being a safety hazard. The room erupted in murmurs. Cameras zoomed in on Karen's horrified face. Councilman Reeves slammed the gavel. Enough! Effective immediately. All HOA activities in Oak Ridge are suspended pending full investigation. Karen's face went pale. You can't do that! I am the HOA. Reeves glared. Not anymore, Mrs. Mitchell. Ethan turned toward her as he left the podium, voice low but cold. You wanted me banned, Karen? Looks like you just banned yourself. The audience cheered. Karen stood frozen, her empire collapsing in front of her. But in her eyes, a spark still burned. She wasn't finished. Not yet. Karen Mitchell had been humiliated on live television, stripped of her HOA authority, and mocked across social media. But the fire inside her didn't die. It mutated. For 3 nights straight, she barely slept. She sat in her dimly lit office, eyes locked on her laptop screen, scrolling through every video, meme, and comment that painted her as Hokerin. Each one fueled her anger. Each one whispered the same message, destroy him. And so she started her smear campaign. Karen created fake profiles, dozens of them. Concerned neighbor, Oak Ridge mom, justice for HOA? Using these accounts, she began flooding community pages and local groups with fabricated stories about Ethan. She posted grainy, edited photos of his bulldozers labeled environmental violations, claimed he'd damaged utilities, even hinted he'd bribed the council. At first it worked. Rumors spread fast. People love a scandal, and Ethan's name started showing up in ugly threads online. Across town, Ethan noticed the shift. His contractor stopped by with a frown. Man, some people are saying you poisoned the soil. That true? Ethan stared blankly. What? He scrolled through social media, post after post, each more absurd than the last. His jaw tightened. She's behind this. Luke slammed his fist on the truck hood. Then let's expose her! But Ethan shook his head. No, if we go public too soon, we look defensive. We need proof. So he started digging. With the help of a friend in cybersecurity, Ethan traced the IP addresses behind the posts. And guess what? Every single one of them led back to a familiar address. Karen Mitchell's home Wi-Fi. Meanwhile, Karen escalated her attack. She printed flyers, plastered them on mailboxes. Ethan Cole, Undercity Investigation. Protect Oak Ridge, stop the bulldozer menace. By the end of the week, even neighboring communities had heard the rumors. Karen was smiling again, sipping coffee on her porch, watching the chaos unfold. You can take my HOA, she whispered to herself, but not my influence. That afternoon, Ethan showed up, calm, collected, holding a folder. Karen, he said evenly, you've got a talent for storytelling. Too bad it's about to get you arrested. She blinked. Excuse me? Ethan handed her a stack of printed screenshots, IP traces, timestamps, and forged posts, all pointing back to her laptop. For the first time, Karen's confidence cracked. Ethan leaned closer. You wanted a war of reputation? You just lost yours. He turned and walked away, leaving her trembling on her porch. The folder in her hands, proof that her own lies had built the trap she'd just fallen into. Night fell over Oak Ridge like a curtain, swallowing daylight, and leaving the neighborhood in a hush that felt fragile and dangerous. Ethan's bulldozer sat idle on his lawn, engines cooling while the glow from his workshop threw long shadows across the street. Security lights blinked. The live stream cameras were off. For the first time in weeks, the world seemed to pause. But Karen Mitchell refused to sleep. Inside her study, she paced like a caged animal. The public humiliation on live television burned in her chest. Trending hashtags. The ethics board notice. The way neighbors whispered as she passed. She'd lost authority, but she still had reach. She still had resources. And she still had a will. She called a covert meeting with Robert Hale and 2 contractors known for taking jobs off the books. They met in a dim parking lot under flickering street lamps. No cameras, no witnesses, or so Karen believed. Listen, she told them, voice low and eager. This man humiliated me. He rallied my community. And now the city is poking around my HOA. If Ethan thinks he can bulldoze his way through Oak Ridge and walk away, he's wrong. Tonight, we make sure his project can't go forward. Robert smirked. Sabotage. Clean, anonymous. We'll hit the fuel lines, flatten the tires, and leave a message that he isn't welcome. They drove out in black trucks, headlights dimmed, the contractors carrying tools wrapped in tarps. They parked a block away and crept across lawns toward Ethan's property, hearts hammering. At the fence line, one man worked on the diesel tank access. Another pried at hydraulic lines while Karen stood watch, whispering directions like a general. The moon glinted off metal, and for a moment, everything felt like it was about to snap. Then a crunch, gravel underfoot. A neighbor's motion light flared, slicing the darkness. Heads turned. The contractor hissed, "Move!" But before they could flee, a figure leapt from the shrubbery. Officer Daniels, drawn by patrol. "Hands where I can see them," he barked. Karen's chest tightened. Her mind raced for a lie, a distraction, a way to spin this into crusade. Robert mouthed, "Run," but she couldn't. She'd come too far. As officers surrounded them, someone in the shadows snapped a photo. The flash caught Karen beside damaged machinery. Karen's throat went dry. For the first time since she assumed the HOA crown, she felt the slope of consequences, but she wasn't finished. Even as handcuffs closed, something cold and determined settled in her eyes. This wasn't the last move. It was one more escalation in a war neither could afford to lose. News vans swarm. Social feeds erupt as the photo spreads. Charges may follow. Ethan watches stunned. The morning after the sabotage incident broke like a thunderclap over Oak Ridge. By sunrise, photos of Karen Mitchell being led away by officers were everywhere. On neighborhood forums, local news, even national morning shows. The captions were merciless. Former HOA president caught red-handed. From rules to handcuffs, the downfall of Karen Mitchell. Ethan woke to a barrage of messages. Reporters called his phone non-stop. His bulldozer lot was swarmed by journalists and drones, capturing the aftermath. He stood on his porch, coffee in hand, shaking his head in disbelief. "Man," Luke said, watching the coverage, "you couldn't make this up if you tried." Ethan sighed. "I didn't have to. She did it all herself." Meanwhile, across town, Karen sat in a police interview room, her hands trembling slightly against the cold metal table. The overhead light buzzed. She looked nothing like the iron-willed president who once terrorized Oak Ridge, her makeup smeared, her pearls gone, her voice small. Detective Morgan slid a folder in front of her. "We've got you on camera with 2 men tampering with Mr. Cole's machinery. 1 fled, but we have your prints, your texts, and enough witnesses to sink the Titanic. So, Mrs. Mitchell, want to explain what you were doing on his property at 2:47 a.m.? Karen's jaw set. "I was protecting my neighborhood. His bulldozers are dangerous. They leak oil. They're unsafe." Morgan cut her off. "You cut the lines, Karen. That's felony vandalism and reckless endangerment. You didn't protect anything. You nearly caused an explosion." She froze, staring at the table. Her mouth opened, then shut again. Outside the station, the world kept spinning. Only now, Karen Mitchell wasn't the controller. She was the spectacle. Within hours, she was formally charged. Mugshot released. HOA members began distancing themselves instantly. The same people who once followed her every rule were now online begging reporters to leave them out of it. Ethan's construction permit was reinstated with city backing. The council even apologized publicly for the unwarranted disruptions. But while the internet roasted Karen, Ethan didn't celebrate. He just watched. Because deep down, he knew something most people didn't. Karen Mitchell wasn't the type to vanish quietly. As dusk settled that evening, Ethan stood outside his workshop, watching the sunset fade behind his bulldozers. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A distorted voice came through, whispering, taunting, familiar. "You think a few charges can stop me?" Ethan's blood ran cold. The line went dead. Somewhere in the city. Karen smiled through a phone in the back seat of a black sedan, headed who knows where. She had one final card left to play. 2 days after the arrest, Karen Mitchell vanished. No official transfer papers, no bail posted, no witness of her release. She was simply gone. Her mugshot was the last trace anyone had. By morning, Oak Ridge woke to the news that their infamous HOA president had escaped custody under unusual circumstances. Theories exploded online. Some claimed she fled to another state. Others swore they saw her car near the woods behind Oak Ridge Creek. A few even whispered that she'd been picked up by someone powerful, enough to erase records. Ethan read the reports in silence, the glow of his phone reflecting off his grim expression. Luke muttered, "You think she's out there?" Ethan didn't look up. "She's out there, and she's not done." That night, security floodlights blazed across his property. Extra locks, motion sensors, cameras, he doubled them all. The air itself felt heavier, like the calm before a new kind of storm. Then came the messages. At first, subtle things. A flyer pinned to his gate. "You can bulldoze land, but not guilt." Then emails with no sender address, each one containing photos of his project, taken from impossible angles. One night, a drone appeared over the property line, hovering silently. Ethan ran out with a flashlight, but it zipped into the darkness before he could see where it came from. By the 3rd night, the fear turned real. Luke woke Ethan around 2 a.m. "You need to see this," he whispered, pointing to the security feed. On the screen, a lone figure stood at the edge of the property, just outside the floodlight range. motionless, watching. Ethan zoomed in. The face was hidden beneath a hoodie, but the stance, the tilt of the head, unmistakable. Karen. He sprinted outside, heart pounding, but by the time he reached the gate, she was gone. Only a footprint in the mud remained, half washed by drizzle. The next morning, he went to the sheriff's office. Officer Daniels frowned as Ethan showed the footage. "She's missing," Daniels said. "Officially. But if she's stalking you, we'll find her." Ethan nodded, though he knew Karen was smarter than that. She'd planned this. Escaped deliberately. And later that evening, as thunder rolled across Oak Ridge, a delivery truck pulled up to Ethan's property. The driver stepped out nervously. "Delivery for Mr. Cole," he said, handing over a small box with no return address. Ethan opened it slowly. Inside was a miniature bulldozer toy, crushed, twisted, and wrapped in a note that read, "You took my power. Now I'll take yours." Lightning flashed outside. The war wasn't over. It had only gone underground. By dawn, Oak Ridge felt different, uneasy, paranoid, alive with whispers. Karen Mitchell had vanished from police custody, yet her presence clung to the air like static. Residents woke to find HOA letters on their doorsteps, freshly printed, signed with her old signature. Property compliance reminder, Mrs. Mitchell, President. No one could explain where they came from. No one saw who delivered them, but they were real. Every font, every stamp matched perfectly. Ethan stared at his own copy, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. The date printed at the bottom wasn't from the past. It was today. Luke stood beside him wide-eyed. "Man, she's supposed to be gone. How is she still running this?" Ethan's voice was low, steady. "She's not gone. She's hiding, and she's got help." Over the next few days, strange things began happening around the neighborhood. Ethan's fuel shipments went missing. His workers reported anonymous, phone calls warning them to quit. "Before something happens, even the city." Inspector, the same one who reinstated. Ethan's permits suddenly reversed course, claiming a new complaint had been filed about unsafe demolition practices. The complaint's author? Karen Mitchell. Ethan slammed the file on his desk. "She's doing this remotely. Someone's forwarding her orders." Luke frowned. Who'd follow her after all that? That's when Ethan remembered. The two contractors she met the night of the sabotage. The ones who fled when the police arrived. If anyone knew how to disappear, it was them. Determined, Ethan drove to the outskirts of town, to an abandoned construction yard where one of the men, Mason Doyle, was rumored to work off the grid. Ethan found him smoking near a rusted backhoe. Mason froze when he saw the truck pull up. "You don't want to be here," Mason muttered. "I want to know where she is," Ethan said flatly. "Karen Mitchell. You helped her once. You still are." Mason's eyes darted nervously. "She's not who you think she is anymore. She's planning something big. Said the real show was just getting started." Ethan took a step closer. "Where?" But Mason just shook his head, dropped the cigarette, and walked off into the dust. "You'll find out soon enough." That night, every light in Oak Ridge flickered. Power outage. Silence. Then, on Ethan's security feed, all cameras blinked, and one by one, the screens displayed the same chilling image. Karen's face, smiling. Static crackling behind her. A computerized voice followed. "You built your empire with machines. Ethan, let's see how it feels when I take them all away." Then black screen. Every bulldozer, excavator, and generator on Ethan's property powered down. Simultaneously, the war had gone digital. The silence after the blackout was suffocating. Every machine on Ethan's property, every bulldozer, every excavator, even the floodlights, had gone dead at once, like someone flipped a master switch. Luke grabbed a flashlight. What the hell just happened? Generator blowout? Ethan shook his head slowly. No, this was coordinated. He sprinted into his workshop, the glow from the flashlight cutting through the darkness. He opened his control panel, his security network dashboard. Instead of normal system logs, every monitor showed the same looping message. "Hello, neighbor." Karen's face flashed on screen. Static distorted, her grin warped. Luke stumbled back. "That's impossible. How's she hacking this? She's not even—" Ethan cut him off. "She's getting help. Someone tech-savvy, maybe those contractors or someone new." He grabbed his laptop, plugging directly into the backup system. Lines of code scrolled as he tried to override the lockout. But every time he gained access, a new firewall slammed shut. Faster, more complex. Whoever was behind it knew his system inside out. "Luke, get to the bulldozers!" Ethan barked. "Disconnect the batteries manually. If she's got remote control, she could fry the engines." Luke ran out into the night, rain beginning to spit from the sky. Sparks flickered across the lot as he yanked cables, his breath visible in the cold air. Inside, Ethan dug deeper. He finally broke through one of the security layers and saw it. An IP trace bouncing through multiple dummy servers. But one location repeated more than any other. A small warehouse complex 20 miles outside. Oak Ridge, listed under a fake landscaping company. Got you, Ethan whispered. He slammed his laptop shut and grabbed his truck keys. As he pulled out of the driveway, his headlights cut through sheets of rain. The world blurred by, highway lights, puddles, the pounding of his heart syncing with the windshield wipers. At the same time, in the darkened warehouse, Karen stood beside a row of computers, her face lit by dozens of monitors. Next to her, a man in a grease-stained hoodie typed furiously. Mason Doyle, the contractor turned hacker. "Shut him down completely," Karen hissed. "No machines, no power, no control." Mason hesitated. "Karen, you're going too far." She slammed her hand on the table. "He humiliated me on national TV. I'm taking everything from him." Back on the road, Ethan's phone buzzed, an alert from his security feed. He glanced down. The cameras were rebooting. For a split second, he saw movement at his property, shadows near his home. Karen wasn't just disabling his bulldozers. She was coming for his house. Ethan floored the accelerator. The final battle for Oak Ridge was officially underway. The storm over Oak Ridge raged like nature itself wanted to witness what was coming. Ethan's truck tore down the desolate highway, tires slicing through rainwater, wipers thrashing back and forth. Lightning flashed across the clouds, illuminating the silhouette of an old warehouse complex ahead. The same one from his IP trace. Inside, the building glowed with pale blue light. Screens flickered against metal walls. Cables snaked across the floor like veins pulsing with electricity. And in the center stood Karen Mitchell, soaked from the rain but alive with a kind of manic energy, her eyes fixed on the feed of Ethan's darkened property. When the warehouse door burst open, the thunder outside was swallowed by a louder sound, Ethan's boots slamming against the wet concrete. He stepped inside, drenched, furious, eyes locked on the woman who had haunted him for months. "Karen," he growled. She didn't flinch. In fact, she smiled. "You found me faster than I expected. I should have known you'd chase the story. You sabotaged my equipment. You broke into my systems. You put people in danger." Karen shrugged. "You humiliated me. You turned my neighborhood into a circus. You think anyone would remember me if I hadn't fought back?" Ethan pointed toward the monitors. "You call this fighting back? You're destroying everything, and for what? Ego?" Karen's voice cracked into a sharp laugh. "For justice. You bulldozed my order, my rules, my community." She jabbed a finger toward the screens. "Look at it now. Chaos, construction, filth. Oak Ridge was perfect before you showed up." Ethan took a step closer. "No, Karen. It was perfect for you. Everyone else was miserable." The hacker, Mason, hesitated at the terminal, hands hovering over the keyboard. "Karen, it's over. He found us. We should go." But Karen didn't move. Her hand hovered over a control switch wired into the computers. "No, not until he watches it all burn." Ethan realized too late. She had rigged the system to overload. If she hit that switch, every machine still connected to the power grid at his property would surge. "Explode or catch fire." He lunged. Karen slammed the button. Sparks erupted across the room, monitors exploding into shards of light. The power surged through the cables, lighting the walls like veins of fire. Mason dove for cover. Ethan tackled Karen to the floor just as an electric pulse ripped through the warehouse, sending both crashing into debris. Smoke filled the air. Somewhere outside, the power grid flickered, then died completely. When the static cleared, Karen was pinned beneath Ethan's arm. Breathing hard, her eyes wild. "Still think you can bulldoze me?" she hissed. Ethan met her gaze. "No, I'll bury this war, and you with it." Sirens wailed in the distance. The storm was coming closer. Rain hammered the warehouse roof, echoing like gunfire. Sirens howled in the distance. Police, fire, maybe even news crews, closing in fast. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and ozone. Sparks hissed from shattered monitors, and flames licked the edges of fallen debris. Ethan staggered to his feet, coughing through the haze. Across the concrete floor, Karen struggled upright, her face illuminated by the flickering chaos. "Karen!" he shouted through the crackling storm of sound. "It's over! You need to stop this before someone gets killed." She wiped blood from her cheek, glaring. "You think you can just erase me? Walk away after everything you did? You did this to yourself," Ethan snapped. "You had power, respect, a community, and you took it from me," she screamed, her voice echoing off the metal walls. Mason appeared from behind a column, dragging a fire extinguisher. "The generator's gonna blow. We need to get out, now." Karen turned to him, eyes wild. "We finish this first." But Ethan had already moved. He sprinted toward the terminal, smashing through the last control board with a steel rod. Sparks exploded outward. The room plunged into darkness except for the glow of the fire creeping up the cables. Karen lunged after him, but Mason grabbed her wrist. "Karen, please." "Look at what's happening!" You'll die here. She ripped her arm free. Better than losing. A thunderclap shook the ground as the generator behind the warehouse roared. A blinding surge of light. Then boom. The explosion tore through the east wall, sending a storm of flame and metal flying into the rain. Ethan hit the ground hard, shielding his head from the debris. Heat washed over him, followed by the hiss of water as rain collided with fire. When he looked up, Mason was gone. The warehouse roof had partially collapsed. Karen lay on the far side of the wreckage, half buried under twisted beams. "Karen!" he yelled, forcing himself up, stumbling toward her. For a moment, she met his gaze through the smoke, and smiled. Not in defeat, but with something colder. Then another section of the roof gave way. Ethan leapt back as the fire engulfed the area where she'd been. Sirens wailed closer, lights flashing through the broken windows. He stumbled outside into the downpour as firefighters rushed past him. The warehouse burned bright against the night sky, a pyre of chaos and madness. "Anyone in sight?" a firefighter shouted. Ethan stared at the inferno. "Yeah," he said quietly, "but I don't think she's coming out." Hours later, when the flames finally died and the wreckage cooled, the crews searched. They found Mason, unconscious but alive. Karen Mitchell, however, was gone. No remains, no trace. Just an empty boot print in the mud leading away from the ashes. Morning crept over Oak Ridge like a sigh after a nightmare. Smoke still lingered on the horizon, where the warehouse had burned through the night. But for the first time in months, the bulldozers sat quiet under a calm blue sky. The neighborhood looked normal again, deceptively normal. Ethan Cole stood in his driveway, the sun glinting off the mud-splattered hoods of his machines. Reporters had already come and gone. The police had finished their questions, and the city had issued one final statement. Karen Mitchell presumed dead in warehouse explosion. Investigation closed. The words should have felt like closure, but Ethan couldn't bring himself to believe them. Not after everything. Not after her. Luke walked up behind him, a coffee in one hand, a newspaper in the other. The headline read, "HOA war ends in fire and fury." "She's really gone, huh?" Luke said quietly. Ethan didn't answer right away. He stared at the charred fragments of one of his bulldozers, the one she'd disabled the night of the hack. "She's gone," he said finally, "but not finished." Luke frowned. "You think she survived that explosion?" Ethan gave a small shrug. "Karen's like a weed. You burn it, it grows back somewhere else." They shared a silent moment, the kind that comes after too much noise. Then Luke nodded and headed for his truck. "Let's hope the council keeps it that way. Oak Ridge deserves some peace." By afternoon, the workers returned. Engines rumbled again, the smell of diesel and fresh dirt filling the air. The project, the one that started all this, was finally back on track. Ethan stood on the site, directing the crew, almost smiling. For the first time in a long time, he felt like the chaos was behind him. But peace never lasts long in Oak Ridge. That evening, as dusk painted the streets orange and pink, Ethan found a small envelope in his mailbox. No stamp, no name. Just his address written in shaky handwriting. He tore it open. Inside was a single Polaroid photograph, a grainy image of his property taken from afar. In the background, just visible through the tree line, was the shadow of a figure watching. And on the back, in red marker, was a message: "You can bulldoze a house, not a ghost." Ethan froze, heart thudding. He scanned the tree line. Nothing but wind. The sun dipped below the horizon. Somewhere beyond the neighborhood, a faint engine rumbled. Distant, fading. Karen Mitchell had become something more than a person now. She was a legend, a whisper, a warning, and as the last of the daylight disappeared, Ethan murmured to himself, half in dread, half in awe, "She's still out there." The camera would pan out, drones capturing the quiet streets of Oak Ridge, the hum of machines returning to life, and one shadow vanishing into the woods beyond the cul-de-sac. The war was over, but the story would never die.